burning bushes, talked of taking chances, going outside your comfort zone. Afterwards, I thanked John for his very arm-twisty message. He gave me one of his big John Dollar smiles and excitedly asked, "Are you going to do it?" I said, "Well, yeah, I kind of have to now, but if I mess up, I'm blaming you," and he agreed with that. So, if you leave here today more confused than ever, let's remember it's John's fault. I've been enjoying our summer trip through the Psalms, and I hope you guys have too. Honestly, I'm appreciating finally being at a point in my life where they aren't scary anymore. When I was young and another faith, Psalms was never a book of the Bible that was, it didn't receive a lot of encouragement to read, to be honest. It was always presented as something long and boring, hard to understand, and poetry. It was kind of the Bible's version of the B-side of 45. Matthew, Mark, Luke, those were the popular A-sides. Everybody wanted to hear those. Psalms, too much, too hard, too long. Now I see the Psalms aren't a bad B-side song like I'm Coming to Take You Away. They're closer to a B-side hit like I Will Survive or We Will Rock You. Our journey in this series has shown us there are so many messages within the Psalms. Messages of freedom, praise, steadfast love, and safety. So today, Psalm 48 is a psalm of the sons of Korah. Now, who were the sons of Korah? Let's set the scene a little bit. Their ancestor, Korah, was actually a cousin of Moses. He got a little cranky and became really jealous and dissatisfied with the leadership of Moses and Aaron. So he tried to lead a rebellion. The revolt ended with Korah, his followers, and their households being swallowed up by the earth and a bunch of Wrath of God-y kind of stuff, people on fire, that kind of thing. Korah had 3 sons who took a step back and said, "Oh, sorry, we didn't mean to be part of this." So they were spared. Their descendants ended up being highly respected soldiers in the armies of David, gatekeepers in the tabernacle, and great musical masters. There's 11 psalms that are credited to the sons of Korah. They took a terrible event in their family history and turned it into a legacy of devotion and praise that lasted generations. The psalms they wrote are full of gratitude, humility, and a deep devotion for God. They speak of God being our refuge, our strength. Psalm 48 is a celebration of God's protection over Mount Zion in Jerusalem, rejoicing that God was living amongst them, protecting them, defeating. Look how the women like little girls. Look how the visitors are encouraged to walk around Zion, count its towers, look at its ramparts, feel that safety. Look at the safe place and the protection God gives. Feel the security here. Feel how safe and protected we are. Verse 3 says, within its citadels, God has shown himself a sure defense. The sons of Korah sing that God is safety. God is security. God provided a strong defense against the enemies who came to destroy them. Look at this safe place. Look at God's protection. The security that belongs to those who place their faith in God is celebrated in this psalm. Let's skip forward to today. What does safety look like for us now? What are our towers? What are we building our ramparts on? What do we find security in? What does security look like to us? Jobs, family, large balances in our bank account, our homes. Do we focus too much on worldly security and forget the protection and security that God gives? What does security look like? I know sometimes it's difficult to remember that God has shown himself a sure defense. Bad things happen. We forget God's there. How many times have we heard someone say, where was God? Why did God let this happen? Where was God, for example, when heaven happened? Disaster happened. when one of our personal hours fell. In verse 9, it says, "We ponder your steadfast love, O God, of your temple." We've heard of God's steadfast love throughout this series. But what does steadfast love really mean? What does it feel like? What does it look like? Steadfast love is always with us, protecting us, even when we think God isn't. John Wesley, I think we've all heard, was raised in a devout Christian home. He was the son of a minister, the grandson of 2 ministers. But at the age of 35, he realized he wasn't feeling the love of God in his heart. He didn't feel God loved him. He wrote in his journal he didn't have any inward feeling of God's presence. He realized this when sailing to America and a storm hit. He in his room crying out to God. He was terrified he was going to die. I'm sure he was asking, where's God? Why is God letting this happen? There were some Moravian Christians on the ship, and he could hear them above the storm. They were singing hymns, and they were praising God as the storm raged and the ship rolled and the mast cracked. They were joyful and at peace. They trusted God. The love God had for them was in their hearts. He realized it wasn't in his. It wasn't until sometime much later in a church meeting back in London that he wrote, his heart felt strangely warmed. Finding love in his own heart after longing for it for so long, we know what happened. He felt God's love. He felt safe in it, he feared. He couldn't hold in what he felt anymore. His ministry took off. He preached 250,000 miles on a horse through England. During this, he preached 40,000 sermons, 2 per day. John Wesley's best sermons were on the love of God, a love that he was sure of even when mobs were trying to harm him. He found his safe place in God. God is our safe haven. God protects us even when we aren't sure God is there. Where was God on 9/11? How many stories were there when people got out saying, something told me to ignore the announcement to stay put? Something said, get out. God whispering, run. Sometimes you do things not understanding why. Rob and I were living in the Bay Area when the Loma Prieta earthquake happened. One day, a coworker was talking about it. Yolanda had been on her way home from work and noticed gas was getting low in her car. Usually, she had a cheap gas station near her house, and she would just stop in the morning and get gas while she was on her way to work. Well, on that day, like everybody in the Bay Area, it was a Bay Bridge World Series, so we were all kind of in a hurry to get home. She was like, I'm going to go in the morning. It's fine. But something kept poking at her and nagging at her. Stop and get gas, stop and get gas. So she did. And as she pulled into the gas station, the earthquake hit, and the cypress structure fell right in front of her, the very structure she was on when the earthquake hit. I'm sure many here remember Pastor Jenny's God Vision goggles. Remember those? Special lenses to see God in our ordinary, everyday experience. Sometimes we need something to help us open our eyes, hearts, ears, maybe some God-hearing headphones to go along with the goggles. I think there's a longing to really feel God's presence with us. We need something to remind us that we're safe and secure, to remind us that we are in good hands, trusting in God's fast love. We lost my dad Halloween of 2023 after an 8-year battle with Lewy body's dementia. He was number 4 of 6 kids, had been a deputy sheriff for 35 years, was the person, whenever his siblings needed anything or were in trouble, he was the go-to guy. And yes, they were in trouble or needed his help many a time. It was difficult watching, always had to be, he could never sit still, and who spent so much time helping others, slowly lose control, body fade away. Confession time. I did have plenty of times where God and I didn't pray. We had chats. God, that's really, this not, how come Dad did so much for everybody else? How come Dad has to suffer? Uncle Ray got to have a nice heart attack on a beach. It was quick, Why couldn't Dad have an easier passing? Didn't he deserve one after all he did for everybody else? Well, came that time, it was time. And 4 in the morning, I'm holding his hand, just Dad and I, in the nice dark and quiet, and praying, hoping that he'd be at rest soon. And then it came. That strange warming John Wesley spoke of, that calm peace and assurance that said everything would be all right. That wave which flows over you and whispers, I'm here, I've got you, I love you, it's going to be okay. I think we often lose sight of God's love and defense, especially when times feel dark, when doubt creeps in, when our pillars of safety collapse, when towers fall, companies go bankrupt, jobs are lost, we lose people we care about. Yes, we doubt in God's presence. We forget we are in good hands if only we allow ourselves to be held. The sons of Korah sang of God's steadfast love, his defense, and that God will be our guide forever. Our song remains the same. This morning we sang, be still, my soul, the Lord is on your side. And every change, God faithful will remain. I hope and pray everyone here feels God's love, God's protection, and will remember that God has shown himself a sure defense. May you leave here today with warm hearts and the surety of knowing, even when you have doubts, that God is with you always, God will hold you in his hands, and God is our guide forever. Amen?